go.
Okay, JD, you're in charge of cinematography.
All right.
Okay,
Add that to
so
the resume.
what I actually wanted to go over today, I wanted to review our emergency action plan, right? So I know this is redundant for some people, because we keep going over and over, but it's new for some people too. And I think it's important that we keep going over it to really make it stick in our head, because we don't want to have an emergency and then we can't remember what we're supposed to do. So we have this emergency action plan. This is on the bulletin board right there. It's available for anybody to look at. People should look at it and know what's in there. But we're also going to go over, I wanted to go over other emergencies that are not really fleshed out in here. And then I wanted to just talk a little bit about Narcan and review that, because we now have Narcan in our first aid kit. So this is an emergency action plan. This is like an OSHA document that we have that tells us how we're supposed to react in emergencies. It's like the official company policy for emergencies. So the biggest thing on here that I put down, any emergency that requires professional response, just dial 911, right? If there's a fire, if somebody's injured, like, don't be shy, just call 911 and get some help, you know? Even if it turns out that it's not that big of a deal, I mean, use your judgment. Don't call 911 because somebody, you know, nicked their finger, right? But if somebody's like actively bleeding all over the floor, right, and it seems like it's serious, it's better to have the backup on the way in case it becomes even more serious in that case. So 911, we had a fire drill 2 weeks ago or so, something like that. It went really well. Appreciate everyone taking it seriously. I know it can feel kind of silly doing some of this stuff sometimes, like we're back in high school, but just a review for anybody that was not here, or anybody that does not know, if we have a fire drill, it's a loud blaring alarm. It's that red alarm up there that's flashing, and it's excruciatingly loud. It's activated by pull stations, which are all over the building. I don't see one in here, but there's probably one right outside the door here. And every room in here, in this building that does not have an active exit sign, there's signs at the door that shows your clearest exits, right? Usually, in any of these rooms, the exits are either that way or that way. There's emergency exits on each unit on either side, right? You should be going out each way, but you should always have in your mind where those exits are. And sometimes your first exit's not the best choice. The fire alarm goes off in here, and you try to run out in that direction, and the fire is actually out there in that office, right? You're going to want to know that your backup exit's that way. When we do exit the building, the meeting point's at the entrance of the parking lot, where the sign is on the other side of the parking lot. That's where we're supposed to be meeting. It's important that we all meet there, because we have to do a head count. And if people are missing, that means somebody's got to come back in here looking for that person. So don't be like hiding back there thinking you're safe and sending somebody else back into the danger zone. All right. Fire extinguishers. There's fire extinguishers all over the building. Just a brief synopsis of how to use the fire extinguisher. There's two types of fire extinguishers in here in the building. Almost all of them, like 99% of them, are these things, the ABCs, which are meant for anything, any kind of fire, whether it's electrical, chemical fires, wood fires. All we're doing is pulling the pin, make sure this is not being sprayed at people, because this is not safe, especially for your eyes, right? And it's just well, you're calling 911 first. If you're using a fire extinguisher, I'd say 99% of the time you're calling 911 first, right? You gotta use your judgment there, right? But generally, you're calling 911 first, and then using the fire extinguisher, sweeping side to side, you know, not right on top of the fire like this, but you wanna be back like this from the fire if that's the fire, right? Sweeping it back and forth, up and down, okay? Managers in the building, right? So I would say it looks like Andrew, the two of you down there, Liz and JD, you have the authority to say what you guys are able to, you guys are authorized, I should say, to turn off equipment if you judge it's safe, right? You know, so if there's a fire in the kitchen and you can turn off the stoves before you leave, you probably should, because it cuts off the gas, right? Again, that's a judgment call. If it's like a raging inferno and the roof's collapsing, screw the stoves, get out. You know what I mean?
This is Jamie.
Okay. This is a K-class fire extinguisher. This is really meant for the stoves, right? There's only this one and the one that is above the stove, the Ansel system, which is cool with the emergency ripcord thing in the kitchen. This is just meant for grease fires, and it's just built a little bit differently. It's more formulated to address grease fires. That'll do a grease fire too, but this is the better option. So if you guys have a fire on the stove, right, and you need to use a fire extinguisher, this is the one you want, because suppresses the grease fire. I think technically it cools the fire too, because grease has a way of reigniting itself because it's already so hot. So that's really all I need to say about the fire extinguishers. So anybody that was not here at previous fire extinguisher training, you guys, if you're comfortable to use a fire extinguisher, you're allowed to use it based on this training here. Okay. Again, it's always a judgment call, whether you're going to use a fire extinguisher or not. The key points, I'm not going to go over this entire emergency action plan. It's sitting there, right over there. Really the key points in this thing, it is summarized in here. What the emergency action plan is, like I said, this is the company's official policy on how we react to emergencies. The evacuation plans, what I just went through. A big note on here is keeping exit routes unobstructed, right? So we're not allowed to have anything in front of the fire exit doors. That's a problem in Unit 1. You're continually moving stuff out from the fire exits in Unit 1. You basically, you have to have, forgive me, I don't remember the actual square footage of what it is, but it's basically a human size. If you were to lay down in front of the fire door, it has to be the entire width of the fire door and that length out. That needs to be clear. You can't have anything in front of it. Nor can you have anything outside of it, right? So if we decide to throw a bunch of glass racks out in the back, on the lawn for some reason, I don't know why we would do that, but if we were to do that, you have to have the fire doors have to be unobstructed on that side as well, okay? The alarm systems, pulling fire alarms, I just went over that. The accounting system for personnel, so I mentioned that when we do our emergency evacuations that we have to do a head count, so make sure you show up in the right spot. The shutdown procedures, really only the managers are really authorized to make those decisions whether we're shutting down or not. And then types of potential emergencies. So that's what I actually wanted to discuss with the people that are here today, right? Because this one really addresses fire. This is the main emergency in here that we address, right? But there's other types of emergencies that can come up here that really we don't have a good plan for, right? Violence in the workplace, and I really want input, so that's why we're here to talk about this, right? I mean, I think for threats, right, that should be reported, right? If somebody's making a threat against somebody or a generalized threat, that should be reported to a manager, I would think, right?
Yeah.
But what about like fights? I'm actually looking for input here because I'm not really like how do you deal with this type of stuff in a workplace? I mean, if people
I never really know like the proper way.
You rip your shirt off and jump in. I've seen that happen on catering jobs. That's not the right way.
Yeah, no, but I mean, you want to obviously try to like de-escalate and separate, but
Right. But you don't want to get hit or injured yourself.
yeah, I really don't want to catch an elbow.
Right. And they say a lot of times when you're taking like emergency response courses, right, they always like stress never create another victim, right, which you're talking about yourself. So you don't run into a roaring fire unless you're properly trained to do that, because you could create another victim yourself that somebody has to rescue. In the same instance of people are fighting, if you get jumped in there and it's like a nasty fight, I mean, you could get pretty injured yourself. I mean, I would say we really, probably up to the managers, right? We have to use our discretion there, right?
Like if we think we can separate them.
De-escalate it. But I would also say too, though, if it gets to a point where it's really getting out of control, like don't hesitate to call 911. You know, if people are acting that inappropriately in the workplace, it's a judgment call, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
But I feel like you're right. I feel like the steps would be attempt to de-escalate and then call the cops.
Right.
Yeah, it's usually what they would do in school. When I was in school, they would just break it up and then like go from there.
Right. And then the next one is like something like more serious, like an active shooter, right? Which hopefully we don't ever have to deal with that, right? But it happens, right? It just happened in this area kind of like over the weekend, right? That was a family thing, but it happens in the workplace.
I feel like we should pick a centralized location that everyone should meet at and like lock whatever doors we can.
Well, I think if there's an active shooter, well, first of all, there needs to be a warning signal, right? And that should be shelter in place, right? I think that actually says it in our emergency action plan, right? That's the signal where shelter in place. right? When you need to like not leave, because I think when there's a shooter, you want to
Mhm.
probably not be like, oh, I gotta get to the other end of the building, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think. So from what I've learned about active shooting, like the first thing to do is cover yourself, right? Get down, try to stay protected, and then assess the situation, right? If you can get out, you can get out. But if you're stuck in a room like this, right, you're supposed to like what? Turn off the lights, close the door, try to stay quiet. But then, if that active shooter's coming in here, then you're fighting,
Right.
right? You know, don't just cower under the. I mean, that's a personal choice, right?
Right.
But I've generally, you know, if it comes down to it, and somebody's coming in this room with a gun, right? You know, use that fire extinguisher on them. You know. But we actually do need a procedure though for this. So I don't know. Is that right though? Shelter in place, is that the right?
I think so.
I think the freezer would be like a good like meeting point. Seems pretty like bulletproof.
It's pretty cold in there.
Very
It's
cold.
freezing
Yeah, right.
in there.
You might be in there for an hour or so. But I mean, I honestly, I don't think, I think if was an active shooter, I don't think there's a meeting place. I think you're
Where you are.
you're
Right.
finding cover immediately wherever you are. So if you're down on that end, right? Yeah, maybe running into the walk-in might be a good spot, or getting outside would be a good thing. I think I think finding cover is the right way to do it. I actually saw a really good training video on this. Maybe I'll find that for the next time we do this. It was put out by a police department a while back.
Yeah, because then at that point, if you're trying to be quiet, you don't want to be like calling and texting each other, being like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?"
Right.
And then like
Right.
everyone's phone's going off.
Right.
So it's kind of like not fend for yourself, but kind of
A little bit.
Well, you don't want to draw attention
Yeah.
to where you're at. That's for sure. You know. Okay. And then natural disasters, flooding, tornadoes, earthquakes. Again, each one of those. If there's, I think we always say if there's a an emergency response, like on a radio or like emergency alerts on your phone, you're following that, following along what the authorities are saying. So in the case of like flooding, right, you may be staying where you're at, or you may be leaving, right? So the response is to follow, you know, like the emergency broadcast if available. But things like tornadoes, right? That's definitely a shelter in place. You don't run outside during a tornado.
Right.
They're not that common here, but they do happen, right? Remember our bakery a couple years ago? Our bakery that we used got demolished by a tornado. Ripped the roof right off the guy's place.
yeah.
And, so is that the same words though? Shelter in place?
I think so.
And then state the emergency if you can. That's probably what we want to do. Shelter in place, you know, tornado. Shelter in place, shooter. And then of course earthquakes, they always say you want to get underneath of things like door frames, right? You know,
Something sturdy.
yeah.
Probably the walk-in would be good.
Then you can run in the walk-in.
Mhm.
Desk, people get under desks and stuff like that. It's to protect you from when the roofs fall down, right? If you have things that can hold the stuff off of you. Okay. So I have a little bit of work to flesh some of this stuff out, but I wanted to kind of get the discussion. Are there other emergencies I'm missing here though? Violence in the workplace, natural disasters. There's medical emergencies, which we'll talk about in a second.
I think that's it. Maybe like it's like chemical, like a chemical emergency.
Oh yeah, chemical spills.
Yeah.
You're right, that is a,
Power outage.
Mm.
okay. See, there are other things.
Feel like gas, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good one. Gas leaks.
A kitchen injury, like 911, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, medical injuries are, so we're gonna kind of go into that, but yeah, the kitchen's probably the place where you're gonna get hurt the quickest, right?
I don't know. I hurt myself a lot.
I just know that from when they do like insurance right? Like health insurance, like disability insurance, right? That they consider culinary jobs one of the highest risk in the country. It's ridiculous. It's kind of dumb. I won't even go into it, but that is definitely. I don't think that's dumb because there's just so many, you know, cutting hazards, heat hazards,
Right.
slip hazards, so many ways to hurt yourself. But you know, I mean, the stuff in ops too. I mean, you gotta be careful down there too. You're moving a lot of heavy equipment. The trucks for sure could be an issue. Those trucks are very unforgiving when you're backing into something and you don't even realize you're backing into something. Could be a person. Music's blasting. You know what I mean? You barely feel a little bump. So, okay. So medical, right? So we all had 911 training. The people that were here in January, right? So a number of the people here are CPR certified. They're the only people that are supposed to be doing CPR if you've been certified. So if you don't actually have a certification, you really shouldn't be doing it because you just haven't been trained on doing it. What I really wanted to talk about was Narcan. We made a decision then to start stocking Narcan here in our first aid kits. So there's now Narcan in my first aid kit that's in me and JD's office, and along with a breathing mask, a rescue mask, right? And I'm in the process of getting Narcan for your first aid kit. So there's 2 first aid kits in the building, right? One's in my office, one's in Liz's office, right? And they should be identical, right? They're supposed to be identical. So there's 2 doses of Narcan up there. So Narcan is, it's it's a rescue agent for people that are overdosing on opioids, right? So an opioid overdose occurs when somebody takes more drugs than their body can handle, and it's a breathing thing. They stop breathing, it slows down and stops, and that's actually what usually kills people in an overdose. They just stop breathing, and they die within minutes of not breathing. Or even if they are resuscitated, a lot of times they have like brain damage because you start getting brain damage within a few minutes of not having oxygen come to your brain. So Narcan only works, kind of jumping ahead here, but it only works for opioids. So it doesn't work for other depressants. If somebody's took a big handful of Valium or something like that and is passing out, it doesn't work for that. And it doesn't work for other drugs like speed and cocaine. So if somebody's having a heart attack because they took too much speed, that's not going to help. You need 911 for that. But the steps here, and I have a 5-minute video we'll watch. But the steps here, the instructions that came with this Narcan, right? Of course, you call 911 immediately if somebody's overdosing. And the way you know if somebody's overdosing, usually they're nodding out, right? Like slumping like this, right? They often fall out. Their pupils are really pinpointed. And then they pass out. If they're passed out and they're experiencing these types of symptoms, you suspect them of overdosing. So it's 911, and then you administer this dose of Narcan. So this just goes in the nose, right? Basically, you just rip it open, right? I think you remove a cap here, and it's just like any old nasal spray, right? Like Afrin or any of that stuff, right? It's just right up in there, right? And then you're supposed to provide rescue breaths if you're CPR certified. So you all remember how to do that. They say chest compressions will help too. So if you're grabbing Narcan, you should grab this thing too, right? This is the mask that you put over, right? And it's got a one-way valve on there so they can't spit back up in your mouth, right? It's especially important in the days of COVID and that sort of thing. You can give a second dose of Narcan if the person isn't breathing within 1 to 2 minutes of the first dose. So stuff works pretty quickly. And you can keep giving people Narcan. You can't overdose them with Narcan, right? My brother-in-law at the conference is allowed to give people 8 or 10 doses of Narcan and bring them back, right? When people really have huge tolerances. But hopefully, if we're at that point, there's an ambulance here by then anyway, and they have other forms of Narcan too. They have injectable stuff. When they do become responsive, you're supposed to explain to them that you gave them Narcan, right? Because this is important, right? Because the Narcan is going to wear off, and when it wears off, they usually will end up going into a withdrawal if they're actually addicted to the opiates, right? And when you go into withdrawal, then they're immediately wanting to get more drugs. But I think this increases the risk of overdosing. Mm-hmm. Not that I think it does. If you have Narcan in your body and then you're trying to use opiates and the opiates aren't working, it's not making the withdrawal go away, people will keep taking more and more opiates, right? And then they cross that threshold again. So it's important that they do not take the opiates again within, you know, that hour or two afterwards. Hopefully at that point, there's a medical professional here, right? EMTs that can like deal with that with them, right? Because in my experience, people at that point are generally not that receptive to what you're trying to tell them, right? They're having like an emergency situation and, you know, a crisis, right? And they don't want to hear that, you know, you better not be taking any more of that stuff, right? So anyway, let me play this video for you.
Training phase and learning how to become an opioid overdose responder. If you have any questions about the content of this video or opioid overdose, don't hesitate to contact info@nextdistro.org or fill out the contact form on our website. Opioids are pain relievers and include prescription painkillers such as OxyContin, Vicodin, or Percocet, as well as drugs like heroin. Fentanyl is a fast-acting opioid that is 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine and is leading to an increase in overdose deaths across the country. Fentanyl is being found not just in heroin, but in cocaine, methamphetamine, and counterfeit pills as well. An overdose occurs when someone takes more or stronger opioids than their body can manage. This leads to respiratory depression. If the person doesn't get help, it could result in death. Some possible signs of an opioid overdose include being unconscious or passed out, slower or stopped breathing, lips or fingernails turning blue or gray depending on the person's skin tone, making snoring or gurgling sounds, and in the case of fentanyl overdose, people have reported that the individual's body becomes very rigid. If any of these symptoms are present, it's important to respond quickly. Check for responsiveness. Shake and shout at the person as if you're trying to wake them. If they don't respond, perform a sternal rub by making a fist and rubbing your knuckles along the person's sternum or breastbone. If they don't respond to this painful stimuli, that means it's an emergency. The first thing to do is to call 911. It's important to know that help is on the way and also to have backup in case the person's having a different kind of emergency. Good Samaritan laws vary from state to state, and it's important to know that law enforcement may respond to your 911 call. Let the 911 operator know that you're with a person who is not responsive. After calling 911, administer Narcan. Peel the package back to remove the Narcan device and put your thumb on the bottom of the plunger and your first and middle finger on either sides of the nozzle. Put the nozzle in their nostril, press the plunger firmly to dispense the medication intranasally. Narcan can take 2 to 8 minutes to work and sometimes more than 1 dose of Narcan is needed. If the person has not responded after 2 minutes, give the second dose. In addition to calling for help and giving Narcan, providing rescue breaths, getting oxygen to an overdosing person may reduce serious complications such as brain injury and keep the person alive until help arrives. Due to COVID-19, many people are hesitant to give rescue breaths. Use a rescue breathing mask if one is available. If a partner, lover, or someone else who lives in the same household as the person experiencing the overdose is available to provide rescue breathing, they may be the safest choice when considering COVID-19 transmission. If the person doesn't become responsive right away, and if you're not performing rescue breathing, put them in the recovery position. This is very essential if you need to leave the person alone. Hopefully, after 1 or 2 doses of Narcan, the person will become responsive. If this happens, tell them what happened. Explain that they were overdosing and you gave them Narcan. If the person uses opioids regularly, they may experience withdrawal until the Narcan wears off. Assure them that their withdrawal symptoms will pass. It's important to explain that Narcan only lasts between 30 and 90 minutes and that using more drugs could increase the chance of another overdose and furthermore is unlikely to ease their withdrawal symptoms. If for whatever reason the person doesn't seek medical attention, stay with them for at least 3 hours to ensure they're all right and they don't need medical help. If you've used your Narcan, it's important to us that you fill out the reversal form located on nextdistro.org/reverse. This will also let us know that we need to send you more Narcan. Thank you for being a lifesaver. If you want to learn more about anything you learned here, you can visit our website for more information and links to other resources, fact sheets, and videos.
All right, so that's the company that I got the Narcan from. They produce that video. I actually put their sticker up there on that fridge because they provide Narcan for free for like houses. So if anybody needs or ever would want to get it for their own safety or somebody that you know, it's up there. The reason why we decided to do this, right, is just because, you know, I won't go like on like some kind of drug lecture here, right? Everybody does whatever they want to do, right? But opiates are just like, I mean, they're really lethal. I just looked up the statistics. I think in 2021, which was the last ones I could find from the National Institute of Health, they registered about, I think, 81,000 opioid deaths in the U.S. just in that 1 year. I mean, that's a lot of people. 81,000 people actually died, and then tons more of overdoses on top of that, right? Because just because you overdose, it doesn't mean instant death, but it could be other serious injuries, like brain injuries and stuff like that. So we felt like it was important to have something like this, because you just never know that could happen, right? It's definitely not an uncommon occurrence for, you know, to see somebody that's overdosing. So hopefully it won't ever happen here. We won't need to use it, but.
Now, has anyone ever, I know this is gonna seem like kind of like a strange question, but at a event, like, that we're catering, or, you know, has anything ever, like, happened, like, I guess?
Not an overdose that I can think of. We've had other emergencies. I think we've even had a death or two, but usually from like cardiac arrest and stuff like that.
Okay.
I can't think of an instance where this has actually ever happened here in our own, but it's really, I mean, this just happens so often though around in the world. I mean, I've seen people overdose, I've seen people on the train fall out and stuff like that, you know, down the city. You know, it can happen anywhere. I know people personally, you know, I know people who are dead because of overdoses, so it's kind of important to me. You know, and honestly, I don't, at this point in my life, I don't worry about calling like 911 and getting somebody in trouble in an event like this. You know what I mean? Right? If you call 911 because they're overdosing, I'd rather see, you know, I'd rather have to explain to them and apologize for getting the cops involved than have them go out on a stretcher, you know, in a body bag, to be honest with you.